What happens when the man invited to protect a family becomes its most insidious predator? From the outside, the Marvel home was a portrait of suburban tranquility, a safe harbor built by a hard-working mother for her daughter. But portraits can be deceiving. Behind the pristine facade, a calculated psychological corrosion was underway, engineered by a man who wore the mask of a loving husband and stepfather. This is the story of how a deep-seated need for control spiraled into a forbidden obsession, culminating in a violent betrayal that would shatter a family forever. Layla Marvel, at 40 years old, was the engine of her family. A career-focused woman, she had poured her energy into creating a stable life after a difficult divorce. 3 years ago, she believed she had found the final piece of that puzzle in 42-year-old Ronan Marvel. He was steady, charming, and seemed dedicated to everything she thought she needed to raise her 17-year-old daughter, Amara Jensen. But Amara was an island in her own home. A quiet and academically gifted teenager, she carried the emotional fractures of her parents' split. With her mother often consumed by the demands of a high-pressure job, a void had formed in Amara's life, a deep-seated need for paternal validation and attention. And this is where the story truly begins. For Ronan, Amara represented something more than a stepdaughter. He saw her vulnerability not as something to protect, but as an opportunity to exploit. He began to study her, identifying the emotional needs her mother couldn't meet and her absent biological father had left behind. His interest was not fatherly, it was predatory. He started small, positioning himself as the attentive patriarch. He was at the school events Layla missed. He offered rides, gave advice, praised her intelligence. To a teenager starved for recognition, these gestures felt like a lifeline. Amara began to see in Ronan the father figure she had always craved. But what Amara perceived as care, Ronan saw as conditioning. He wasn't building a bond, he was building a dependency. As Amara entered young adulthood, Ronan's observations became more personal, more inappropriate. He would comment on her appearance, her youthful energy details a stepfather should not be cataloging. This wasn't a sudden turn, it was the deliberate execution of a plan. He recognized her hunger for affection and prepared to serve a poisoned meal. Amara, feeling invisible to the rest of the world, was about to welcome his attention with open arms, completely unaware that she was stepping into a meticulously crafted trap. With Layla often working late, the Marvel home became Ronan's private theater of manipulation. The boundary between father and daughter didn't just blur, Ronan systematically erased it. What began as an emotional grooming campaign soon escalated into a forbidden affair, a secret world built for two, right under Layla's roof. For Amara, lost in a storm of teenage emotion and desperate for connection, this twisted dynamic felt like love. She mistook Ronan's predatory focus for genuine devotion. He became her confidant, the one person who seemed to truly see her. She failed to recognize that his interest wasn't born of love, but of a chilling desire for power and control. The affair bloomed in secrecy. It was nourished by lingering touches that held for a moment too long, by compliments whispered when no one else was around. Ronan was an expert at testing the waters, pushing the line inch by inch while gauging her reaction. Each time Amara welcomed his advance, she stepped deeper into his web, her naivety a tool in his arsenal. She began to crave the moments when her mother was gone, seeing them not as a betrayal, but as a chance to be with the one person she believed understood her. Ronan's manipulation was a masterclass in psychological warfare. He isolated her emotionally, feeding her insecurities with insidious suggestions that no one, especially her mother, could ever care for her the way he did. "This is special," he would tell her. "What we have is something the world just wouldn't understand." These words became her reality. In her mind, their transgression wasn't wrong. It was a profound, secret love affair. Her infatuation consumed her. She began to dress for him, to speak for him, to orbit his presence entirely. But was this her first true love, or her first experience with a predator who had perfected his craft on others before her? The lies, the secrecy, the stolen moments, they were all converging. The pressure was building, and a secret this dark could never stay hidden forever. It was only a matter of time before the foundations of their perfect suburban home began to crack. For months, Layla Marvel operated under the assumption that her family was thriving. She had trusted Ronan implicitly, believing he was the steady hand guiding her daughter while she focused on her career. But the human mind has a powerful, primal instinct for when something is wrong, and Layla's was screaming. It started as a collection of disjointed moments that didn't quite add up. A glance between Ronan and Amara that lasted too long. A quiet conversation that silenced the moment she entered the room. The air in her own home felt charged with a tension she couldn't name. Amara, once her quiet child, was now more animated, more secretive, and seemed to be pulling away from her at an alarming rate. At first, Layla dismissed it. Was this not just typical teenage rebellion? A daughter growing closer to a stepfather than her busy mother? But the feeling festered. It was during a family dinner that the fragments of her suspicion clicked into a disturbing mosaic. The way Ronan's eyes followed Amara, the intimate ease of their banter, it wasn't paternal. It was possessive. That night, sleep offered no escape. The image of their interaction replayed in her mind, a terrifying puzzle she was desperate not to solve. Was she paranoid, or was the unthinkable happening right in front of her? Doubt, once planted, grew into a suffocating vine. Layla started observing them, no longer as a wife and mother, but as an investigator in her own home. She began coming home from work at odd hours, disrupting the private world they had built in her absence. Each time, she found them sitting a little too close, their sudden silence upon her arrival more damning than any words. The emotional chasm between her and Amara had become a desolate abyss. She searched for proof, some tangible evidence to either confirm her fears or dispel them as paranoia. She found no secret emails, no explicit photos, but the absence of evidence did nothing to quiet the alarm bells in her soul. Something was fundamentally broken. Layla now stood at a terrifying crossroads. To confront Ronan without proof could detonate her marriage and alienate her daughter forever. But to remain silent felt like a monstrous betrayal of her own child. The truth was a shadow in her home, and she knew she had to drag it into the light, no matter the consequences. The weight of suspicion had become unbearable. With Amara out of the house, Layla decided the time for silence was over. The quiet that had settled between her and Ronan was no longer peaceful. It was the cold, heavy silence of a battlefield before the first shot is fired. "Ronan," she began, her voice strained but firm. "We need to talk." Ronan looked up from the television, his expression one of mild curiosity, but his eyes were calculating. "What's this about, Layla?" She took a breath, trying to steady the tremor in her hands. "It's about you and Amara. Is there something happening between you two?" The question hung in the air, a lit fuse. "I've seen the way you look at her. It isn't normal." For a manipulator like Ronan, a direct challenge to his authority is known as a narcissistic injury, and his reaction was textbook. He didn't just deny it, he went on the attack. "That's ridiculous, Layla," he scoffed, his initial calm dissolving into irritation. "I'm being a good stepfather, that's all. You're never here. She needs someone to be there for her, and you're letting your imagination run wild." It was a classic tactic: deflect and project. He twisted her accusation into a commentary on her failings as a mother. But Layla refused to be gaslit. "Don't you dare put this on me," she shot back, her voice rising with a mix of anger and hurt. "This isn't about my job. This is about you crossing a sacred line with my daughter." Ronan's face hardened. The mask of the charming husband fell away, revealing the cold fury beneath. "You are letting your paranoia destroy this family," he snarled. "There is nothing going on. If you want to ruin our marriage over some baseless fantasy, that's on you." The confrontation was a catastrophic failure. He hadn't just denied her fears, he had weaponized them against her, painting her as the unstable, irrational source of the family's problems. Layla was left standing alone, trembling not just with frustration, but with a new, chilling realization. She hadn't just angered her husband. She had declared war on a predator, and he now saw her as an obstacle to be removed. Defeated but not broken, Layla knew there was only one person left who could give her the truth. She found Amara in her bedroom, a fortress of teenage solitude. Mustering every ounce of maternal love she possessed, Layla confronted her daughter not with accusation, but with a desperate plea. "Amara," she began softly, "I need you to be honest with me. I need to protect you. Is something going on with Ronan?" The question shattered the room's tense silence. Amara's face went white with panic. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, in a voice so quiet it was almost a whisper, the walls of denial crumbled. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she confessed, tears beginning to fall. He was different with me. I didn't mean for it to go this far." In that moment, Layla's heart didn't just break. It atomized. Her worst fears were confirmed. She held her sobbing daughter, whispering, "This isn't your fault. I promise. We will fix this." The confession broke Ronan's psychological spell over Amara, but it also armed Layla with a terrible, undeniable truth. That night, when Ronan returned home, he didn't walk into a house of secrets. He walked into a reckoning. Layla stood waiting for him. The grief on her face hardened into righteous rage. "Amara told me everything," she said, her voice shaking with disgust. "It's over, Ronan. I know what you've done." Ronan's world tilted on its axis. The game was up. The carefully constructed reality he had lorded over for months was gone. His face, for a split second, was a mask of pure panic. Then, it twisted into something else entirely. "You don't know what you're talking about," he snapped, a pathetic, reflexive denial. "Don't lie to me." Layla's voice boomed through the house. "She is a child. You destroyed her." At this, the predator, now cornered and exposed, dropped all pretense. The raw, violent anger he had barely concealed before erupted. "You're blowing this out of proportion. She wanted this too," he roared. "Stay away from her," Layla ordered, her voice now dangerously calm. "I am going to the police. You are going to pay for this." The threat of exposure, of losing control completely, pushed him over the edge. His eyes narrowed into slits of pure hatred. "You will not ruin my life," he hissed, his voice a low, lethal promise. "You have no idea what you've just done." In that moment, Layla knew the fight for her family had become a fight for her life. The confrontation had shattered the last vestiges of normalcy. Layla knew they were in grave danger. Her plan was simple and desperate. Pack a bag for Amara, wait for the dawn, and flee to the safety of the police. She was a mother trying to save her child, but she had gravely underestimated the rage of an exposed narcissist. In the suffocating darkness of that night, Layla was jolted awake by the sound of footsteps in the hall. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Before she could process the threat, her bedroom door flew open. There stood Ronan, the man she had loved, the man she had trusted with her daughter's life. But the man in the doorway was gone, replaced by a vessel of pure fury. His eyes were wild, and in his hand, he gripped a kitchen knife. The moonlight caught the steel blade. "You're not going anywhere," he snarled. Terror, primal and absolute, seized Layla. She scrambled to escape, but he was on her in an instant. A brutal struggle erupted. Her screams were swallowed by the chaos as Ronan, a man who could not bear to have his empire of lies dismantled, overpowered her. His rage had one singular, final objective: to silence the person who had dared to expose him. In a final, horrific act of violence, he plunged the knife into her chest, extinguishing the life of the woman who saw him for what he truly was. Hearing the commotion, Amara rushed into the room and was met with an image from a nightmare. Her mother, lifeless on the floor, and the man she thought loved her standing over the body, his hands stained with betrayal. Her scream tore through the night. Police, alerted by a neighbor, swarmed the scene moments later. They found Ronan, dazed, the realization of his monstrous act finally dawning on him. The affair, the grooming, the psychological warfare, it all ended here. In the aftermath, Ronan was arrested, but the true sentence was handed to Amara. A life haunted by her mother's murder and the devastating knowledge of the role she was forced to play in the tragedy that destroyed her own life forever. The Marvel family's story is a chilling reminder that the most dangerous monsters are often the ones we invite into our homes. What are your thoughts on Ronan's psychological manipulation? Join the discussion in the comments below. For more deep dives into the cases that defy explanation, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Fatal Affairs True Crime HQ. Until next time, stay vigilant.